one of my favorite summers of all time was 8th grade summer. I think that was before 8th grade. My friends and I felt pretty brave to get around. And we used to go to Haight Street a lot and go to the Pro-Am games at Kezar.
That was Josh Chuck, co-director and producer of the documentary Chinatown Rising. I'm Jeff. Welcome to Storied San Francisco, a weekly podcast where San Franciscans from all walks of life share their stories, and you get to know your neighbors. In this podcast, Josh takes us back several generations to tell of various ancestors and the journeys that led them to Chinatown. He talks about his parents, who met at Chinatown's Cameron House, where his dad worked. Then Josh takes us through Chinatown and around San Francisco, when he and his teenage friends used to get around town. He ends part one with his time at UC Davis, which was where he started getting into filmmaking. Here's Josh.
My father's grandmother came to the U.S. from China and was actually sold into slavery and possibly prostitution. We don't really know, but that was not an uncommon thing. There wasn't a lot of Chinese women here, and because of that, that was an industry. And so on the way, she got intercepted and I guess rescued by Presbyterian missionaries right here at Cameron House.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
on the way, meaning
when she got here,
like landed and they're
yeah. And so we have a long history here in Chinatown and here at Cameron House. My dad's father came over from China, and he has an interesting story. He ran a gambling house here in Chinatown.
Also not uncommon. Maybe to run it, but gambling houses themselves.
Yeah. Those were common, and the few pictures we have of him, he's wearing like a 3-piece suit. It's very cool.
Right.
And he has my dad in a 3-piece suit when he's like 4 years old.
Yes.
So my dad's mother was born here and spoke English and used to tell him a lot of stories about the old Chinatown. And so he was born in 1935. So she would talk about things that happened in the early 1900s that fascinated him.
Right.
Then my mother, her parents, my mother's story. So this is one I have not interviewed her about, but I have to.
Okay. So preview now on Storied San Francisco.
Yeah, really.
Her
grandfather was a guy named Tong Bong, and he's well known in Chinatown as one of the merchants who helped save Chinatown after the earthquake.
Okay.
So in 1906, Chinatown burned to the ground, and the city wanted to relocate Chinatown because it was such a prime location. They wanted to move Chinatown out to what's now like the Bayview.
Okay.
So that what some of the merchants here did was they collected money from China and Hong Kong, from investors, and they built up Chinatown as fast as they could. And they built it in a way that would be attractive for white people.
Okay.
So it became like a Chinese fairyland almost. So a lot of the architecture you see in Chinatown, that was not how China was.
Right.
That's how Americans saw China as.
And it also wasn't like Chinatown was before the earthquake, or was it?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It was not ornate. It was not super so-called Oriental or whatever.
Yeah.
So Tong Bong, the building is still there that he, where his store was. It's on California and Grant.
That's your grandfather.
My great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
So he owned a store there, and he had it was called Sing Fat, and it was an import-export store, and he had a branch in LA and possibly New York. So successful family on that side, and my mom's parents were both doctors. here in Chinatown. And my grandmother was one of the only, what kind of doctor is that called? They deliver the babies. I should know this, actually.
Yeah. Well, you have pre-daddy brain. It's fine. No, I know what you're talking about.
But her name,
anyway.
So her name was Helen, and she delivered many of the babies here in Chinatown. And so actually, there's a whole generation of women from Chinatown who are also named Helen, because people didn't know of American names.
Right.
So they asked the doctor, well, what's your name? And so there's a lot of women named Helen.
Like, do you have any idea of the span of that generation?
I don't know. That's why I need to do more research on my mom's side.
That's a really cool.
So my mom and dad, they met here at Cameron House.
Oh.
She's almost 10 years younger than him. Mm-hmm. So he was working here, and she was like a college leader here, and they ended up getting married. And
what year would that have been?
Oh man, you're gonna give me that? I don't know.
Or decade. 60s-ish?
In the 60s. Yeah.
Let's say 60s. Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe for folks who aren't familiar, can you tell us what Cameron House is?
Sure. Cameron House is, right now, it's a nonprofit organization in Chinatown that does mostly youth programs and immigrant family services, like counseling, case management, things like that. Cameron House started in 1874 as a place where Presbyterian missionary women had the idea to help Chinese girls and women who were being forced into prostitution or slavery.
Right.
So the women were white women, and they felt like their faith told them that they needed to help the people down the street. And so this became a place where they would physically rescue the women, or the women would hear about this place and run up here, and they were able to live here, learn skills, get matched up with husbands, equipped with what they needed to live a healthy life.
Right.
It's quite a legacy when you think about women's stature back then, even white women. Right. To be able to go up against brothel owners, against police, against whoever, and protect these girls. So there's quite a legacy here.
And not just, if I can editorialize real fast, like brothel owners and cops and probably a city government that was very corrupt and very racist.
That's right. So,
yeah.
So it's pretty astounding what they were able to do. Hundreds and hundreds of women were rescued, and when that became a little bit less of an issue in the community, and families started moving into Chinatown, in the 30s, 40s, the services here changed. So they became more family-oriented, and youth programs. So the so-called golden age of the youth programs at Cameron House was probably in the 60s, 70s, where every day hundreds of youth would come here and gather. And there's a faith aspect to this place. It's a Christian faith-based, and so a lot of people credit their values, their faith, to growing up here.
Okay, wow. When your parents met, was your dad already? Is he considered a minister?
Yeah, he's a Presbyterian minister.
Was he already doing that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know what brought him or guided him into doing that?
I've asked him that a lot. He attributes it to role models. Growing up here at Cameron House, he saw people doing good work for other people, and the common denominator was their faith.
Right.
And he had a couple close friends who went to seminary. He didn't start out in seminary. He went to college. He was teaching science at one point, but always kept connected to Cameron House. And I think he decided to just try out seminary, and ended up going the full way and becoming a minister.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I jumped forward, but
it's okay.
Is there anything else background wise that you feel like going into before we get to little Josh Chuck?
I grew up in Chinatown, but it's funny. I'll depending on who I'm with is how much I emphasize this kind of thing, right? So if I'm with people who are not from San Francisco or from San Francisco but have not spent a lot of time in Chinatown, let's say, then I'll just be like, yeah, I'm proud. I'm from Chinatown. That's me, you know?
Okay.
But if I hang out with my friends from here or who know me and know my background or whatever, it's different because I'm like, I'm an ABC, you know? I'm American-born Chinese. Mm-hmm. I don't speak Chinese. Mm-hmm. I grew up going to a private school. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have what you would call like necessarily like Chinatown street cred growing up. So, so that's my disclaimer. Is I have, I guess it's just everyone has their own background and with the neighborhood they live in. But I feel like I've been here so long, my whole life pretty much, that I feel connected, and I have an idea of what's going on a little bit.
Right. And you said you did grow up in Chinatown?
Yeah, I grew up in Chinatown.
Whereabout did you guys live?
Because my dad worked here as one of the leadership folks, we lived in Cameron House.
Oh, okay.
Cameron House has apartments upstairs, and 4 different pastors lived here at the same time. And so our family grew up here. I eventually moved, well, my mom moved to Washington and Powell.
Okay.
Kind of close to the rec center. Mm-hmm. And so then when she moved out, and I would split time. My brother and my sister and we would spend most of the weekdays at my mom's, and on weekends we'd come to my dad's.
Okay, so 2 siblings. Mm-hmm. Where do you fit in, like age-wise?
I'm the youngest.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're the baby.
Yeah, my dad likes to remind me how much of a surprise I was.
Okay, so tell us about Chinatown in the 80s. Through the eyes of a kid.
Again, this is a kid who, didn't go to school in the neighborhood necessarily.
Do you want to shout out to where you did go to school? You don't have to.
I went to Cathedral School for Boys. Okay. It's in Nob Hill. There's like 20 kids per class.
Oh, wow.
And that was like 1st through 8th grade.
Right.
Great school. I had a really good experience. I don't know if everyone did, but I did. Yeah, I mean, growing up in Chinatown, I was just, I didn't think about it that much that it was Chinatown. It was just where I lived, and I spent a lot of my time at the rec center playing basketball, at the arcades playing video games. When I felt brave, I would go over to Broadway Street and just like walk around and see all that stuff that's going on.
All the riffraff.
Yeah.
But you guys had arcades down here in Chinatown? I don't know of any now. I mean, there aren't any anywhere.
The arcades I used to go to, one was in an arcade. There was 3 games there at this corner store on at Cable Car Corner. That's like Powell and Washington right there. Mm-hmm. And then there was one called Bonkers. It was down on Kearny, not quite Chinatown, but right outside Chinatown. Mm-hmm. And then there was the one on Broadway, which was later I figured out how sketchy it was. But as a kid, I had no idea.
Fearless. Kids are at least back in our day, we were fearless.
Yeah. Nothing could get between me and my video games.
Right. Well, I guess like you're saying, like you spent so much time in Chinatown that it wasn't like a thing. Was leaving Chinatown kind of a special thing? Like, how much did you get around the city as a kid? I'm talking like like before maybe teens. Did you get around town?
Yeah, so my closest friends were from Cameron House, from the programs here. There was a Friday night program that starts in 6th grade, and that's when I started to really get around town, just take the bus everywhere. One of my favorite summers of all time was 8th grade summer. I think that was before 8th grade. Mm-hmm. my friends and I felt pretty brave to get around. And we used to go to Haight Street a lot and go to the Pro-Am games at Kezar. Mm-hmm. And this was like, oh my God. I don't know. Do you follow basketball?
A little bit.
Okay. So at Kezar, they have forever. They've had these free Pro-Am games during the summer, and Pro-Am just means anyone plays. People they form these teams, and one of these teams we would make sure we caught every week. And my friends and I would go. It starts at 8:00. We'd go out there, take the bus, and this team had guys like a high school Jason Kidd, NBA players like Gary Payton, Antonio Davis, Brian Shaw, all on one team. Like most of these teams have no NBA players.
Right.
And this team had all these guys, and it would always be packed.
Yeah.
It was, so we'd go there, we'd hang out, and then the game would end at like 9:30 or 10. We'd always try to get their autograph every time for some reason.
Well, you knew it was special. You knew these guys were special, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just such a special time. And then after that, we would go hang out at this place called Park Bowl, which is a bowling alley where Amoeba Records is now.
Right.
So Park Bowl is like it was a bowling alley in the Haight, right? It's pretty neat. And one of our friends' parents worked there, and so we'd hang out until after it closed.
Sweet.
And again, play video games, bowl.
Yes.
Do all that. And thinking about that now, I'm like, damn.
Yeah, you got to sneak in without sneaking. It was like parent approved.
I wonder if kids do that now. Go out like that.
I mean, if they're lucky.
Yeah.
It probably all goes back to the parents, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we felt pretty, and being the youngest, and my parents were so busy. My mom was an English teacher. My dad was working at Cameron House, and he was on city commissions and all this kind of thing. I had a ton of freedom, and that was perfect for me. And I just went around with my friends, and we had nothing else to do.
Right.
We just ran around.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Without a care in the world. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So do you want to take us through now maybe your teen and or like did you go to college? Did you leave to go to college? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so like I went to Lowell High School, which was like perfect for me. Coming from an all boys tiny private school to go to Lowell was like everything I wanted. Mm-hmm. And I also spent a lot of time at Cameron House in the youth programs. I volunteer in the summers. And I ended up going to UC Davis. Now, like, this is an aside, but I've talked to kids lately, and they were telling me to get to UC Davis, you have to have like a 4.1 GPA.
Right, but not back in the day.
No.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I think I had a 3.5 maybe at the best, and it was just the SAT, and the prices were totally reasonable, and man, kids, it's hard for kids these days, I think.
Yeah.
But I went to UC Davis, and I studied community and regional development.
Okay.
They call it. I studied that because I took some intro courses, and the books they read were incredible. I mean, like
do you remember
like
any names?
People's History of the United States was one of the first books I read in
Howard
those classes.
Zinn?
Yeah. And just like books about community and books about like social issues and things like that. And so I actually enjoyed reading all those things. And so I said, yeah, this is my major. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it or whatever, but
right.
I had the luxury to not worry about that too much, I guess.
Right.
And senior year, I had a group of friends that I had been hanging out with the whole time, and we were roommates. And we discovered that we all had this love of movies. And I found out that some of these guys actually had videotapes from like high school or before high school of themselves like messing around trying to make movies. And I thought, like, hey, guess what I got? I got that too. And so we kind of like just had this love of films and TV and everything. So when we were fourth year, I decided to buy a computer and a camera.
Okay. Is this late 90s, early 2000s?
This is about 2000.
Around 2000,
yeah.
okay.
And so this was the very beginning of like digital films. So like mini DV tapes. We used Final Cut Pro 1.0.
Wow.
And
that's old school.
It crashed all the time.
Of course.
It took 2 days to render things, but it was such an advance.
Exactly.
It was amazing. So
light years at the time.
So our friend Evan was in UCLA at the time, and he wanted to get into film also. And he worked at the computer lab. So he got us the software. He taught me how to use Final Cut Pro in like half an hour. And then I showed my roommate how to use it in like half an hour. My roommate and I took classes at the local public access TV station.
In Davis?
In Davis,
okay.
Yeah. And they were not using digital.
Right.
They were using huge VHS cameras, tape-to-tape editing, stuff like that. It was
so you were already
pretty classic.
More advanced than they were.
Yeah, and they told us we had to take all these classes if we wanted to air a show.
Okay.
So we decided
on public access.
Yeah, so we decided we would air a show.
Were you already? I might be getting ahead, but were you already thinking like documentary style, or were you thinking like feature film or shorts, like fiction, or did you have an idea?
No, we were not thinking any of that.
You weren't thinking anything.
We were thinking of like, hey, let's make something that's gonna make our friends crack up.
Okay.
And that's it.
Right.
So we started making this show, and we called it Davision. So it's kind of like Dayvision, but with like an accent on the end. And basically, each of us would have ideas on what we want to do, and then we would take charge of that segment, and our friends had to help. That was the rule. Like, if someone's going to direct and produce a thing, you just got to do whatever they ask you.
Your friends in this little group?
In this little group.
Like a little collective?
Kind of,
right?
Yeah. And then we would show it. It doesn't cost anything. There's almost no limit to what you can show on public access. And at that time, there was nothing showing on that station.
Right.
It would be like announcements all day long.
Right.
So we thought it was a nice opportunity to make something and have some people watch and like see ourselves on TV.
Does Davis have a film school? Were any of you guys film majors?
Nobody was a film major. I don't.
Or like broadcasting or communications.
Oh, I guess they do have that.
Do they?
Well, yeah, they have communications,
okay.
And like I'm sure they have like some focus on that kind of thing. But
yeah.
none of us were doing that.
You guys just wanted to do it.
We just wanted to do it.
That's awesome.
It turned out I would end up spending like 40 to 50 hours a week on this TV show.
Wow.
I would walk into my classes and just be like, oh crap, the paper's due today?
Right.
Like I had no idea. I was so into it, and I had so much fun. And that's kind of how we got started. Now that my roommate, his name's Greg Louie, he ended up being a professional editor. He works in LA, different TV stations and stuff like that. And he became the editor for Chinatown Rising.
Okay.
Our other friend in LA, his name's Evan Leong. He is a director, and he directed some films that got into Sundance and things like that. And he was a really key advisor for Chinatown Rising. Mm-hmm. And then our other best friend, he was in the Navy when we were in college. He had his own TV show on his ship.
Oh my God, what are the chances?
So
did he know about y'all back?
Oh yeah, so we all taught each other. We all kind of taught each other and just had so much fun making something, working on it, and then showing our friends.
Right.
Like showing each other.
Right.
He had a lot of restrictions on the ship though. They couldn't do a lot, and but it was fun. It was so much fun. And so that's Anson Ho, who also does film work, and he was our director of photography. So he basically shot all our footage for Chinatown Rising. So ton of fun working with friends.
And this is like roughly like 20-ish years ago, although you guys probably started.
It was about 20 years ago when we first started doing all this like fun stuff. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite a college career, and very like, at least anyway, fill in between after college and when you started working on the movie.
Yeah, I've just saw. It's been a mix of things for me. I've never had a full-time job more than like 3 years, and that was only a couple stints. I've been doing freelance video work. It turns out, I guess my niche is like doing nonprofit storytelling. I've worked in nonprofit a lot, and I know a lot of folks there, so I kind of understand how important their work is, and how they need to get it out there about what they do. And so that's what I've been doing. I also do a thing called the Community Internship Program, which is like a community immersion program, and that's for the company UPS. It's just like one of a kind program, I think, that no other company does, where they send upper managers from all over the world in their company to San Francisco for 3 weeks. And during that 3 weeks, it's there to be like immersed in the community, volunteering, trying to figure out like what the issues are,
right,
so that when they go back as the leaders of the company, that they can really instill this culture of service, of community in the company.
That is really cool.
It's very, very cool. I've been doing that for 15 years now.
Okay.
I take 2 groups a year. So that's another one, another gig I do. I traveled a lot after college. I really enjoyed just going around with no set agenda and exploring the world, and ended up mostly going to Asia, just because I think it's the most fun, and you can afford the most, and it's got everything. So
where else did you go?
I started like traveling around Southeast Asia quite a bit, and then got to visit, China for a month, and Japan for 3 weeks, and Korea and India. I got to explore, and I tried to tell myself that I might not get this chance ever again, and it was so great to explore on my own a lot too.
Right.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
That was Josh Chuck. Join us Thursday for part 2, when Josh will talk about his documentary, Chinatown Rising. Music for Storied San Francisco is by Otis McDonald. Photography for this episode is by me, Jeff Hunt. I also host and produce the show. Our website is storiedsf.com, where you can browse more than 100 episodes, check out all of our live events, and visit our store to help support us. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to the show on YouTube or wherever you're listening. If that's Apple Podcasts or iTunes, please do us a quick favor and rate and review what we do. And if you have any feedback for us or suggested guests, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and stay healthy.